Hi, everybody. It's been a long time. Did you miss me? Yes. I missed you. That's right. I wander, so I'm going to try and stay close to this, but there may be the take it out and hold it in my hand moment. My name is Douglas Welton. I'm Chief Product Officer at Einstein's Legacy. There's how you can drop me an email or hit me up on Twitter or whatever you want to do if you are just so compelled to do so after this talk. You can also just come up and talk to me. And when we get to the end, we can do that question part. I'm going to talk about generative art. How many people have heard of the term generative art before you decided to come to this tech talk? Okay, that's a good amount. What do you guys think of when you think of generative art? Got a clue? Got a one-sentence explanation?
Math-based art.
Math-based art. Okay. Anybody else?
Using like physical sensors and inputs to generate random data that then you extrapolate to.
That's a good word, random. That's a good word, random. Here's what we're going to talk about today. This is a topic this big, and I have this long to talk about it in. So I'm going to hit the high points and kind of take the tops off the mountain, so to speak. And today we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you a few pieces of generative art to get started, and we'll just kind of set the table with that. We'll define it. We'll talk about it from specific to general. We'll cover moving objects and inputs and math-based art and stuff like that and other things as well. And then we'll try and go from the top down and say, what is art and what is generative art? And look at it that way. Then I'll do a little bit of a history lesson, and then I'll talk to you about some of the tools that I think are the tools to know about in terms of generative art at this point in time. All of this is subject to change, usually, because it's computers and stuff. Things do change. First of all, I'm going to make this go away, and I'm going to make a piece of generative art pop up on the screen. All right, make some noise. That was sad. Have you noticed what happens? Have you heard the term audio reactive visual? Notice when I talk loudly at it, and a part of it is we got a big old room and my little microphone is on this side of the computer. But as I talk, the computer responds, or this little piece of program, which is a Quartz composition, which we'll talk about a little bit later, responds to my voice. It decides to go in a different direction. It decides to be a different color. It decides to be a different size, all based on the sounds that are coming in, which is mostly my voice, but it's also fun things like the air conditioning and whatever else sounds you guys are making, body noises, etc. All right? That is the first little piece let's talk about. Here's another one. Let's see. Take a listen to this. Do you think there's anything odd or uncommon about it? Some guy with a synthesizer, right? Probably in his bedroom, having a good time. This sound was made by bats flying underneath a bridge. And it's a nifty thing because the difference in the sounds, the pitch, the tempo, the instruments are controlled by where the bats were in the sky. This was done at South by Southwest, and it is a promotion for Bacardi, just in case you needed to go out and drink something this weekend. But I mean, it's a really nifty kind of a sound, and when you see the explanation of it, the more bats there are in the visual, the more percussion there may be, or the percussion is different if the bats are at the top of the visual as opposed to the bottom of the visual. And here's another one. Let's give this one a try. I like this one. That's a sphere. And it's changed by the sounds that we're hearing. This is another audio reactive visual. This is a recording of a performance, and the artist simply said, this is a sphere I have here. When sounds come in, how many people do OpenGL? OpenGL doers? There are no hands going up. Okay, well, if you were an OpenGL doer, you can write, like, you know, little shaders, and they will make images do stuff. This is in response to sounds that were ambient sounds in the environment. And this was done in real time. So when this was presented at a conference, and the guy basically stood around making little noises, and his sphere changed a lot. And some of these are very, very complex changes in terms of what the sphere looks like. And it does kind of funky things, and it's just a little snippet of code. Anybody that's written some C could probably do exactly the same thing. That one I thought was really nifty. And one more for you. Anybody in here have a Connect? No, I didn't put that one on there. Okay, you're out of luck. Let's see, oh, this one, yeah. This is what I think a lot of people think of as generative art. You press the mouse, you move it along, it draws a pretty picture for you, right? Wherever you move. You guys have done that before, right? That is generative art too. A lot of these things have to do with visuals or audio in terms of how we see them and how we interact with them. So let's get back to it and talk about what is generative art. And as I said before, I'm going to approach this thing from two different angles. I'm going to approach it from the more specific to the more general, and then I'm going to go the other way, and I'm going to come from the more general back down to the more specific. We had math art, we had objects moving around. Is it electronic music or algorithmic compositions? Has anybody ever played a DX7? Did you program the DX7 or did you play the DX7? I programmed myself. Some? Yeah. Is it not the hardest instrument in the world to program? It is. In 1983, the DX7 came out, and everybody that played synthesizers was so happy because you could make the waveform look exactly like you wanted to. But what did you want it to look like was the question. What does a guitar waveform sound like? What does it look like? Is it regular? Piano, is it regular? You know, the Michael Jackson Thriller album, they were all so cool and keen on making new sounds. This instrument, like I say, it was a bear to program because it gave you a sine wave and it let you use other sine waves to modify that first sine wave, and you could kind of get some cool stuff, but you kind of had to work at it hard, all right? But there are lots of things that you can do with the sound of music, and we'll talk about some of those in a little while. The name Brian Eno will come back. Also, you know, it's a look at algorithmic compositions. Do you guys know the formula for writing a pop song? You all do. I'm sure you do. What is it? Verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus, repeat. That's it. Now you are all certified songwriters. You with me on this? But there's a formula to it, right? So therein lies this notion of it's generated, the music, the songs that we call pop songs are generated by the formula. How many of you have ever seen the movie Tron, the first one? Was it the greatest movie of all time, man? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. One of the things that happened in the movie Tron was Ken Perline worked on this movie, and Disney had this group that they called Magi, M-A-G-I, and it was something. I can't remember what the acronym is right now. But their whole notion was how to make the best special effects ever. Now, we take it for granted now when we watch a movie that the fire kind of looks like fire and it looks real. I suggest that if you go back to YouTube and watch 1970s cartoons, that the fire does not look real, okay? Skin looks real when you look at Toy Story or you look at The Incredibles, the skin looks real. Everybody's hair, Violet's hair in The Incredibles looks really real. Ken Perline won an Academy Award for visual effects for Tron, mainly because of the development of Perline noise. Anything you see from, you get one of those little SIGGRAPH books that has, you know, all the best from SIGGRAPH, any animation that you see probably is taking advantage of computers creating the animation. Is that generative? Who knows about demo scene? Anybody a demo scene person in here? I am pulling out words that you have never heard before. Anybody here from Europe? I am pulling out words you have never heard before. Demo scene is this. Imagine you walked into a club, and you guys have, nobody in here has ever been to a nightclub. I'm going to make that assumption. I'm pretty sure we're going to stick to that. You've been in the nightclub, and as you walk in, you walk past the little camera, and you walk, you know, through that little dark part, and you hear the music, dum, 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 and it's coming, right? And you turn the corner, and all of a sudden, you see your image projected on every wall in the place. It spins, it turns, it disintegrates and becomes a picture of everybody in the club dancing. Have you ever had that experience? Demo scene. This was Europeans saying, hey, we could do cool stuff with this graphic stuff, and we could put it in a club, and we could have a good time. And it was the arrival of the VJ, the person who was not there to spin the music, but was to make the visuals incredibly interesting as you were in the club. Demo scene's been around for, let's call it 15 years or so. And there are great tools out there, VideoMax, which I'll talk about a little bit later, tools from Resolume, Modulate. Those are all tools for helping that occur. Anybody, here's a simple one. Anybody ever in here go to see Blue Man Group? I think they've been to town a couple of times. All right, and you know in Blue Man, they touch stuff, they throw it, and all of a sudden it's on the screen, and it does stuff, and the screen does stuff, and it comes back to them, and all that sort of stuff. How does that happen? A lot of it is generative art. At the very end, I'm going to show you a piece that is live, and all of the effects are not done afterwards. If you were in the room, you'd see exactly the same thing, but it's stuff that a lot of times we think, oh, they added that after in Hollywood. Excuse me. Is it industrial design and architecture? AutoCAD, 1982. All right? Now we go to a place where is it art or is it something that we can actually draw? Here's a picture of Blender. Anybody in the room use Blender? A couple of people over here use Blender? Are you making art when you're using Blender, or are you doing something practical? What? Art, yeah. Because, you know, once you get past the interface with Blender and you figure out all the different things it can do, you can make some quite unique visuals, whether they be moving visuals or standstill visuals with Blender. Boop. We still there? Yep. I guess I have to touch it every once in a while to make sure it's still live. How many people have been to Paris? How many people have gone to La Défense and visited the Grand Arch? How big is the Grand Arch? Grand? It's 110 meters by 110 meters by 110 meters. It is an exploded hypercube, a tesseract. Not the one in the Thor movie. Okay? But the size and shape of that particular, and even down to the placement of the structure, was determined before the structure was even drawn out to be built. When we put those kind of constraints on our architecture, is it generated art? Something for us to think about. Generative art includes all the things that I've just talked about. And we put in things like robot art, you know. There was a program called Aaron that would actually draw for you, kind of, and that sort of stuff. You know, those people that are, I saw this and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. It was called software art. And what do you think software art is? No guesses? They actually printed out their code and made pictures out of it. Everybody's got to do something with their lives, right? So, what is generative art? You know, in a certain way, it's a rhetorical question. What is art? Couldn't we spend a long time sitting around this afternoon talking about that? What is generative? What makes some art generative art and not just art? You know, generative art means that there's got to be at least some kind of system generating the art, but all systems that generate art don't make generative art, because a painter generates art, right? So we've got to come up with a definition. And this is a picture of Philip Galanter. Hope I didn't botch that name. His definition of generative art, which he gave at a conference about 10 years ago, seems to have stuck. Generative art refers to any practice, any art practice where the artist uses a system, such as a set of natural language rules, a computer program, a machine, or other procedural invention, which sets into motion some degree of autonomy, contributing to and resulting in the completed work of art. And there's some really interesting points in here. First and foremost, I think the one that's interesting is that the system that is generating the art is kind of like the co-author. It's not separate from, it wouldn't work all by itself. It is a cooperation between the artist and the generative system. Generative art does not come in one particular style. That's not what it's about. It's about the system that creates it. And it's not all about technology, as we'll talk about in just a minute. Technology gives you the ability to do some amazing things. However, that's not what all generative art is about. Let's take a look at this. A little while ago, the word random came up. This is an artist that online, he sells pictures of the United States. And the pictures he sells are maps of the wind at any given particular moment. Okay, let's go back. Yeah. And so that's a map of the wind all across America this morning. So tomorrow you get a different map. You can zoom in infinitely and request whatever portion of that you want. I think it's kind of neat. There's a lot of chaos in that system because winds are very dynamic and they're continuous. There is a lot of randomness in there because the wind, not unlike squirrels, will change direction at any given moment. There's complexity because there are lots and lots and lots of different pieces of wind that are getting drawn. And there is a degree of order. Order usually comes about when you have some overall guiding principle for how you're putting this thing together. Let's talk about the history of generative art. There's no defined beginning point, but in 1968, a guy by the name of Manfred Moore used the term generative art to describe his computer-assisted drawing. And it kind of stuck. But let's look at some people that may have happened before that did some interesting stuff. This is a picture of Eminem, right? Just checking to see if you guys were awake. Some dead guy with poofy hair and had a curling iron. Mozart. He had a cool kind of a dice game that he had worked out. And there's a German term for it, which I am not going to butcher in front of you. Thank me. Go ahead. But what he did was he'd take pre-written pieces of music and he'd roll dice. And he'd put them together based on how the dice fell. If you roll the dice 5 times, you have over 7,700 different combinations of music. If you roll the dice 6 times, you have 46,000 and some change combinations of music that you can have. Well, that makes you a great composer, doesn't it? Is it cheating? Well, you know, I wrote these individual pieces. How they go together, does that matter? Were the Beatles wrong when they put that, you know, number 9 on the record backwards? I don't know. This is John Cage. John Cage has done some interesting things with generative art in a non-technology kind of a way. John Cage is known for his 1952 composition of, it's called 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Anybody heard of this? And what's it all about? It's nothing? It's about what? It's about the noise around you. And that's one of the things. You know, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The composition has a set length, just like the Grand Arch is 110 meters, right? He said, for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, I want the musicians to sit and make no intentional noise. So every performance is different because every performance has different ambient noise. And therein lies the performance. So next time I come up, I'm just going to do an hour-long non-talk. We'll see how that works out for you. Cage also in 1987 did another piece that is kind of interesting. It's called Organ Squared as Slow as Possible. And his note was simply to play this as slow as possible. It's organ music, which, you know, would send me running. I don't know about you guys. But since I've run out of the room, you would have to stay generally between 20 and 7 minutes to hear the piece as it's kind of conventionally performed. However, some people, since it's as slow as possible, you know somebody's got to be going for the record, right? And the people currently trying to go for the record are St. Bacardi's Church. It's in Germany somewhere. I'm probably butchering the Bacardi part too. They started playing the piece in 2001. At the pace that they're playing, it's going to take 639 years to finish. That leaves us at 2640 for those of you who are scoring at home. It's generative art. Is it a different piece if it takes 600 years to play than 20 minutes? You know, for bugs that only live at night, is the sunshine a different day? Who knew? Don't ponder that too much. Naked Lunch. William S. Burroughs. You know, he was kind of an odd kind of a guy. Creepy might come out, I don't know. But he did a very interesting technique in creating his novels. He wrote 3 novels in the early 60s where he simply cut up the words from his previous novels and put them back together in a different form. The Nova trilogy, as it's called. Is it art? Is it interesting? Did he have a specific technique about generating these things? Was he the only one? No, there was this Bowie guy did something similar. The still dead Kurt Cobain did something similar. The wish he was dead Tom York did something similar. Yeah, Radiohead fans, do not come get me. But it's interesting. In the 70s also, Brian Eno, we talked about him, they had a very interesting technique for recording a record. They literally put 2 tape decks side by side. And normally the tape ran from one spool through the recording and up onto the take-up spool. And they said, no, what if we run it from one deck to the other and then take what we get out of the second one and send it back to the first one? The album was called Discrete Music. And in terms of ambient sound, it was a very interesting record, and people still refer to that as a hallmark record. Robert Fripp worked with him. This is a chart of Robert Fripp using his guitar to do this. Brian Eno simply said, I'll use synthesizers and an EQ. And you produce a very interesting set of music. Here's a computer one. The open source novel. Does anybody recognize this guy? He's probably unrecognizable almost. This is Douglas Rushkoff. What do you think an open source novel is? Do you want me to tell you? This is an interesting idea. I remember 1997, what Douglas Rushkoff did is he said, I've written a novel. It is set in 2008. However, the text is not discovered until the 23rd century. People in the 23rd century do not know what Microsoft is. They do not know what the internet is. They know nothing about any of this. What I need for you to do, people, is to annotate the novel. So people were able to, online, contribute footnotes to the novel. The novel was published like 5 years later, actually. It sat online at like GeoCities or one of those early website thingies for forever. But in essence, the novel could be changed by the way that people participated in the online community. This online community will never really take off, right? No one will do anything with that. Did it do it? You guys know who that is? Yeah, it did it. Animated GIFs. They're there for everybody. You can't get away from them. They just exist. This is Steve Wilhite, and he is, you know, termed as the founder of, or the inventor of the GIF file format. What you get here is that people use this for art all the time. They show up, you know, there's dancing cats and just fill in the blanks with anything and everything. And you'll see those all over. Is that art? I think they actually have curated shows with animated GIF files, you know? Everybody wants to do a cinematograph, don't you? Let's talk about some of the tools that you can use to create generative art. Anybody in here use processing? Couple. You guys like processing? It's okay? I'm a little bit on it too. But if you're a programmer, or processing came to be in 2001, and I like to think of it as an integrated development environment. It was developed by a couple of guys from MIT's Media Lab, Ben Fry and Casey Reese. And back in 2001, everybody thought Java was great. Don't you still? Okay, the silence speaks. Anyway, but processing was an environment where people who weren't programmers could write little programmers, sketches, and they'd get executed, and they created visuals. It looks just like any other language. And you can use processing to create a score of different visuals. There's a very large community. Folks who are artists, I think, turn to processing before anything else to create their visual art. Another tool that has a large following, to tell you the truth, although it's a Mac-only tool, is Quartz Composer. There's no programming here. All you do is move these little boxes around, you connect the things on the side, and you get visuals out. It's simple as that. You don't have to know what a GPU is. It's all hidden behind you. It's node-driven, but Apple used this to great avail. The stock effects at one point in time in Final Cut were all done using Quartz Composer. If you got iPhoto and you had the little slideshow going, it was all done with Quartz Composer. A lot of folks in the demo scene are using Quartz Composer to create visuals. It's very easy to pick up. Again, it's a Mac-only tool, but it's very easy to work with. This is Cinder, or an illustration. Cinder is an open source framework, and it simply provides a way for you to use C++ to create visuals. There's another framework called Open Frameworks, and Cinder and Open Frameworks do very similar things. Cinder does not have any dependencies on, I won't say any, has few dependencies on third-party frameworks. So you don't get caught up in that you're waiting for somebody else to update before you can update your open frameworks. This was somebody's application. I think the company was called Planetary. And their whole notion was the way that you were going to navigate your iTunes catalog was that you would go into a solar system, which would be an artist. And then you would go to a particular planet, which would be an album from that artist. And then if you wanted to play a specific track, that would be a moon around that planet. Does that sound easy to navigate or what? Conceptually, it's brilliant, comma. But all of that was done with a little C++ and a pre-existing library, and that's Cinder. And I talk here about VideoMax just to get wrapped up with the tools. VideoMax is, it's kind of like if you were a music DJ, you'd have a board in front of you and you would mix sound. Here, you mix visuals. VideoMax is not the only tool out there in the marketplace. I think a lot of people think it is the best tool out in the marketplace. The folks at Resolume would probably argue with you, or the folks at Modulate would argue with you, or Koji would argue with you. But it simply gives you the ability to sit down and mix a bunch of visuals together and come up with a result. And that is a look at all those generative art. I've got one more piece that I want to show you though, and it's a nifty piece because, again, everything you see, if you were to walk into the studio where they were doing it, you would see it exactly like it was appearing on the video. But what they've done is they've generated all these images, they've mapped them onto moving objects in real time, and it creates quite a stunning effect. So let's take a look at that piece. And this was done by a San Francisco group called Bot and Dolly. The hamster that's running your internet is slow. Anyway, it's really a nifty video. I wish it was not doing what it's doing. Hold on, let's give it a second, see if it can get loaded. I will make this go away, so we'll make sure we have plenty of room for it to run. Do you notice how those things are projecting? Gotta love live demos. Anyway, what do you think he's holding in his hands? It's a flat surface. And as it moves, did you notice how there were things that appeared to have texture and depth? And what they were doing was they were using processing to actually project those images onto a flat surface that was moving in real time. Therefore, you get this nice picture here, and it's like, oh, that's kind of like magic. And they do this kind of like magic when you go to a Cirque du Soleil or something like that, or a Blue Man. That's what this group does. So that's my talk about generative art. Hopefully I knocked a few mountaintops off there and kind of got you in the ballpark. Anybody got any questions? Anybody going to go out and start using processing immediately? Yes, sir.
I think you talked mostly about intentional generative art. Can you talk a little bit about sort of like accidental, where someone's doing something and as a result?
And that falls into the category of randomness. And that is, there's this whole notion between randomness and order. And for a lot of artists, they want to start something and let it happen, and then it's over with. A number of people create projects wherein, this one is an interesting one. If you've got an iPhone, do this. Download a piece of software called the Bacterial Orchestra. And the Bacterial Orchestra is just a little piece of software that kind of figures out when another person in the room has Bacterial Orchestra on their phone. So when you get a bunch of people together, all the phones start chatting and they make noise. Therein is the unintentional, intentional, so to speak, because those phones will very randomly pick up who's doing what to who, and it depends, what you hear depends completely on who's in the room at what given time. So that was, Bacterial Orchestras were one of the first iPhone applications, so we must be talking 2008, 2009-ish. And you know, it was great to talk about at a party. You know, that particular type of art didn't last for a long time. I'm sure people are still doing it. But the guys that did it, I believe, were Danish. Something Scandinavian. I think it was Danish. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, as someone who's obviously been monitoring this, where do you see this evolving? Has it changed rapidly? Is it sort of coming of age still? Where do you see it going?
The visual part, I think, is very much coming of age because now everybody has a computer on their desk that can do wonderful things. And the question is, how do you get that into an environment where people can see these visuals and interact with them? Some friends of mine here have, I can't remember what they call it, the something globe, but they basically make their money by taking their little globe to parties around town and special events, and they use imagery that they're capturing from their computer, they munge it a little bit, and they put it on their globe, and that becomes a part of the visual that's in the courtyard where people go out and see. I think that that stuff, as entertainment value, immensely successful. In terms of music, I think that a lot of people, I think that it's happened, it's happening, and I think a lot of people will push away from that because one could talk in terms of the whole rap hip-hop scene and sampling that we've done this, let's stop. Some people might say that, some people might not. Other things in terms of using it for science, you know, fluid dynamics just screams for you to do this. And actually I think one of the visuals that I researched was basically a fluid dynamics problem. And it let people see how the water would react in real time when they move things around in it. So there are a lot of uses, you know, just for science. A lot right now is entertainment based, in particular, you know, the high profile things are the demo scene guys, the people that are making special effects in movies or, you know, that sort of stuff. Anybody else?
Other than the friends you mentioned, do you know who else is doing generative art in Charlotte?
There was an artist up at the McCall Center, and I'm not sure if she's gone, that one could call her work generative. She was the lady that had, when you walked into the McCall Center, she had put soundproofing around the entrance. So you had a very different experience when you were going through the soundproofing as opposed to when you got in the regular gallery, because the gallery in there has got a lot of hard surfaces and very reflective. I might call that generative art. I'm not, you know, there are unintentional generative artists. Quartz Composer has become, the folks at Facebook said, hey, we can do all of our interaction design using Quartz Composer. And so they started doing that. And then they kind of packaged up what they were doing in a framework they call origami. All of a sudden, anybody that's doing interaction design wants to check out origami and see what it's all about. And it's just a little framework that helps you. You know, you got a phone. How do people interact with the phone? How can you test drive that? And that's what origami allows you to do. And so there are some folks that you know, you'll see on a list, and they've got a Charlotte address or whatever. So those folks are around. How far they've taken it into other areas, I don't know. There was a guy by the name of Johnny DeCam that I had some interactions with about 14 years ago. He was actually in Charlotte at the Mint several years ago. So he is also a big name in terms of generative art. Anything else? Thank you, folks.